Where was Jesus? Today, my guest will tell you where he was. It's Restoring Hope Live, today live.
Restoring hope, open my heart to sing, taking the darkness inside, revealing your light, restoring hope, open my eyes to see the world through different eyes, revealing your light, restoring hope.
Good morning. It is the 16th day of June in the Lord's year 2013. I'm J. Michael McCoy, and welcome to RestoringHopeLive.com. Produced by Maddie and Eric. My special guest today is Bob Monserrate. If you're a regular viewer or listener of this program, you know Bob as our in-house forensic scientist, as well as the cat in the hat that watches the chat. He won't be watching any chat today because he's going to be chatting with us, telling his story about an amazing event that happened at 9/11. Now, Bob, tell me, you're part of the DMORT team, and what does that stand for?
Yeah, DMORT stands for Disaster Mortuary Operational Response Team, and that is a federal response team, and we respond to major disasters where the locals are overwhelmed with the number of dead, and so therefore we go in and bring in a portable morgue, and we bring in people from all over the country to assist them in identifying the dead.
So you're after the Red Cross is no longer needed, basically, because you're not Red Cross. You don't go in and deal with the living.
No, that's correct. And usually when we're there, the Red Cross is also there. Salvation Army is also there. Church groups come in to assist those that are survivors.
And some of the disasters that you've been to, I know Flight 232 in Sioux City, Iowa,
right,
in
1989. Actually, you probably won't believe it, but the first disaster that I experienced was when I was 6 years old.
Really?
Yeah, and that was in 1957. There was a train that went off the bridge in Newark, New Jersey, and 48 people drowned because the drawbridge was partially up. They believe what happened was that the engineer had a heart attack because he never stopped the train. The red lights were on, and the train actually derailed because there's an automatic derailer, because if you don't stop, it's going to derail the train. But the train was going so fast that it went on the ties, and it never stopped. And several of the cars with the engine went off into the water, and 48 people drowned. And so that was, and when I heard about that, I just ran out of the house, and I'm only 6, but I remember it very well.
Yeah.
And I went out there, and I looked, and I can see the cars dangling off into the water of the drawbridge. Now, my uncle, who was a railroad man, worked on that bridge, worked on the railroad, and he lived with us. He was part of my being raised. He was a very godly man, and he was a very strong, tough guy. And I always looked up to him because he was very strong. I never met anybody as strong as him, and in the faith and in physique, his physical means.
And he was one of the few in your family that was an alcoholic, right?
He was not.
He was not.
He was not. And yet he went and helped recover those bodies from the train. We saw him on national television, which they did have in 1957, and I could see him on there. And he came back, and he would come back. And as he would tell me the stories of what he had to do, not just me, but the family. And what I noticed was this big, strong guy in physical strength and spiritual strength broke down and was crying over what he had to do because he never experienced, that death. And to me, as a 6-year-old, I learned right then at that time that strong men can cry. It's okay for men to cry. And yet, what are men taught?
Yeah, don't cry.
Don't cry.
Cry,
don't
baby.
show emotions. You're weak if you do that.
Cry, baby.
And yet, he, who I always saw as the strongest man ever, did it. And so that told me as a child, it's okay to do that. It's okay to have feelings. It's okay to care about people and to have those emotions. So that was my very first.
Do you think that experience somehow led to you wanting to be a forensic scientist? Is that maybe where it began?
Well, I would say not a forensic scientist, but it probably was a start of where I wanted to be as far as in some science field. And I got into biology, later on, because I had a really strong interest in high school with biology. and that was my focus, and that's what I wanted to do. But I think that was kind of an introduction to me for disasters. Little did I know that I'd be doing disaster work ever since that time.
Yeah.
And that not only that, but I would be dealing with people that were hurting through a critical incident stress management team, which I've been a part of since Sioux City, air disaster. And so I learned a lot and was equipped at that time, starting at that early age, for what I was going to be doing for most of my life.
Bob Monserrate is our guest today. He is a forensic scientist, and he's going to talk about how he found Jesus in the middle of so many of these disasters. And eventually we'll tell the story of 9/11, and it'll blow you away. I mean, it'll just blow you away. And you don't know Bob, and that's okay. You're kind of learning to know him through the show. I've known Bob for a long time, and he's just an honest guy. He's not going to make up a story. So when you hear these, you're gonna go, what? No, that's freaky. That story's embellished. Bob doesn't embellish. Embellish? Is that the way he doesn't embellish. So these are some incredible stories. I'm also led to tell you that I wanted to have a guest on today for Father's Day. And the man that I wanted to have on buried his 24-year-old daughter yesterday. And he just couldn't do it. So he's planning on being here next week. And he's going to tell the story of what it was like to lose his 24-year-old daughter to a tragic car accident a week ago. So I didn't space off Father's Day. I don't blame him. It's just too tough right now. And so he'll be here next week. All right, Flight 232. So was that your first disaster as a DMORT member?
Actually, it was not a DMORT team deployment at the time in 1989. I didn't join DMORT team until 1995. But in Sioux City, I met one of the people that introduced me to the DMORT people. So from that particular scene in 1989 in Sioux City with that DC-10 that crashed, that was my connection. I connected with people that eventually got me to DMORT, and then my disasters after that were DMORT disasters.
Now, for those of you that don't recall, Flight 232 was a flight that was heading from Chicago to Denver.
It was actually from Denver to Chicago.
Okay, the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the hydraulics went out on the plane, and it was impossible to control the plane. The plane wouldn't go straight, right?
Yeah, the rear tail engine, it basically broke apart, sent shrapnel throughout the plane, and cut through the 3 hydraulic lines. And they couldn't steer. They couldn't steer only through the engine on the wing engines.
Yeah, so basically they were trying to get to Chicago by going in circles, literally. And then they discovered they could no longer control the plane. The captain, who was
Captain Al Haynes.
Right, and he was considered a hero by many. He tried to bring the plane down in Sioux City, Iowa, and it ended up coming down. How would you call that?
It tumbled.
Yeah, wing to wing to wing, the long way.
Right. I mean, it actually came up and was cartwheeling.
Yeah.
Down the runway, and we thought, that everyone was lost.
Right.
Because it was a huge fireball. We didn't think there were any survivors.
Yeah.
Yet we had about 184 survivors out of the 296 on board.
So you lost 100.
About 112 eventually. Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't want to be morbid here. And if you've got young kids listening, I promise it won't get bloody. But just imagine bodies scattered among a 2-mile area, maybe more, and you having to go out and pick up the pieces to identify them for their families. An amazing story about one family that Bob brought peace and serenity to in the middle of that disaster. And later on, where was Jesus at 9/11? Bob found him. Wait till you hear this story. It's coming up next, live here on Restoring Hope Live. You can find us at restoringhopelive.com. All of our shows from the beginning are right there for your convenience. And thanks for listening. I'm J. Michael McCoy, and I love my job. Couldn't do it without you.
Restoring hope.
J. Michael Michael McCoy here with Restoring Hope, and I've got my friend Joe Meintz in from St. Gregory's Retreat Centers. And, no matter what the issue that we speak of with Restoring Hope, it all comes down to hurts, habits, and hang-ups. Now, maybe those habits turn into addictions. Maybe those hang-ups turn into depression or heavy resentments. And maybe what you've done is you've thought, well, I'm okay. I don't drink too much alcohol. I don't smoke dope and do meth. But I've got some antidepressants that I get from the doctor. And I had that back injury, from a year or so ago, that old football injury, guys, right? Wink, wink. So you take some painkillers, and before you know it, your life's out of control. And I know you don't want to admit that. I'm okay. I've been there too. But at some point, things happen, and people notice. And you're in the grips of prescription medicine addiction. And you think, well, the doctor's given it to me. It's got to be okay. It's not. And one of the people that can help you release from that grip is St. Gregory's. How crucial is it that people understand what they're doing with prescription drugs nowadays?
I'll tell you, it's an incredible epidemic, and it's really at the forefront of what we see in the addiction treatment world, really. There's so many times where people are trying to figure out, well, are these narcotic painkillers good or bad altogether? Are these anxiety relievers good or bad altogether? And what we're really finding is those drugs serve a purpose. When you've had an injury and you're taking those painkillers, everyone knows, I think, that can be a real godsend when there's extreme pain. The difficulty is exactly what you had mentioned. When there's some other hurts, habits, or hang-ups in your life, then all of a sudden those painkillers start filling a need other than just the physical pain. Yeah. When they start replacing some of the difficulty in dealing with your emotional traumas with a pill, as well as the physical relief, now we have a real twofold issue. We've got physical issues as well as mental and emotional issues that pill is really helping you with. And that's how we see so many people come into this trap of prescription drug addiction. Now, a lot of times we have a lot of trouble with people who fall into the grips of a prescription drug addiction because it doesn't seem like the same type of a thing that we'd normally speak of when we talk about addiction. And they're a lot of times reluctant to seek out help because they think, well, I'm not a cocaine user or I'm not at the bar every day, but they know that they've got difficulties in coming off of these medications and they're affecting a lot of different dynamics in their lives. And that's something that St. Gregory's really prides ourselves on. When somebody comes into our program for help, we first of all really make sure that we're helping you to become well enough to recover wholly. We're really trying to help you understand why are you behaving and what's really causing those emotional difficulties, and then teaching you the tools and skills to overcome those barriers that are keeping you from being the person you were created to be. We disagree with the idea that God created you to be an addict. We're really getting down to the barrel here of understanding what does it look like for you to honestly evaluate what are your gifts, what are your talents, where is your value. And when we understand what those are, now we can start lining up what types of activities, what kind of life engagement are you looking at that's really going to provide that happiness for you. And that's how we intend to help people recover. And let's help to restore you from the bottom up, and you're able to obtain happiness and joy from other areas of your life.
I've met them. They're honest to goodness human counselors that understand where you're coming from. They understand your hurt, your habit, and your hang up, and they're going to help you, and they're going to help you with the love of Jesus Christ. That's the most important thing. All right, number again, 1-888-778-5833. That's 888-778-5833. The website is stgregoryctr.com.
Restoring hope. Open my heart to sing. Taking the darkness inside. Revealing your light. Restoring hope.
20 minutes after the hour on the 16th day of June, we call this Father's Day 2013. I want to shout out to my father, John, a great guy. I can't begin to tell you the lessons I've learned from my father. And what was interesting, and I don't know how long ago this was probably 10 years ago, and it was a Father's Day, and Dad and I went out to the garage, and I told him all the things that I wanted him to know about what he had done for me, just in case that was our last Father's Day. And there was no reason that it would have been the last Father's Day, but I wanted to make sure that he knew the impact, the positive impact he had on my life. My father gave me very few negatives in life. So what a great guy.
He was an encourager.
Well, he wasn't an encourager as much as he was just a positive guy. I mean, you could say something bad about the worst person in the world, and he would say, well, maybe he wasn't that bad. Just an honest, genuine guy. I always saw the good. And boy, he's done such a great job of being a husband to my mom. Really takes excellent care of all of us. And of course, I'm fortunate enough to be a father 4 times. So happy Father's Day to all my kids. And here's one more thing, if I can, and then we'll move on, I promise. Happy Father's Day to all the single moms out there who raised your children without the influence of a father. You are a father, okay? You're a daddy. You're a papa. Whether you know it or not, you were a wall in your child's life as a mother, but you also acted as a father. And I salute you. I just salute you. I think single moms are the biggest heroes in the world, or they become really, really horrible things to their kids. And I'm always sorry for that. We met somebody, we're going to meet somebody here in a couple weeks by the name of Ray. And she was brought into this world without a father, and it was not a positive influence on her. But anyway, we'll meet Ray coming up down the line here on RestoringHopeLive.com. Next week, I wanted to have him today, but he buried his 24-year-old daughter yesterday after a horrific car accident, which happened after a terrible argument with her fiancé just weeks before their wedding. The last thing that her fiancé said to her was not nice things. There was a lot of emotion and alcohol involved, and she left, and then she died. And anyway, so that's what I wanted for our Father's Day program today, but I talked to Brad this morning, and it just wasn't there yet, so he'll be here next week. Unbelievable story. All right, Bob Monserrate is my guest today. He is a forensic scientist, and he's part of the National DMORT, D-M-O-R-T.
Correct.
Team. And when there's a disaster, such as in Moore, Oklahoma,
right,
sometimes your team is called in to identify bodies.
Right. We were put on alert for that particular tornado, but the locals were able, and I thank God that there weren't that many deaths that we were required to be there.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because you're only required to be there when the amount of death is heavy.
It overwhelms the locals.
Yeah, you were at Katrina.
Yes.
You were at, obviously, 9/11, which is one of the stories we're going to tell a little later.
Yes. Also Guam.
Guam?
The plane crash in Guam, a 747, 1997.
Oh, I remember that.
Korean airline.
Yeah. Oh, ooh. Is that in the jungle?
It crashed in the jungle, yes.
So you had to go into the jungle to find the bodies?
Well, we had a lot of help with the military to do that. But yes.
But they brought the bodies to you.
Yes, basically at the morgue.
Okay. I want to hear the story about Flight 232 in Sioux City because there were bodies all over the place. And what'd you say,
112.
112 dead, 170 lost, right?
Well, we had 184 that survived.
184 that survived, 112 that died. And basically, you have to take a body in the worst of conditions, parts missing, and identify them. Now, is that a DNA thing?
We do use DNA, but we also use fingerprints. We use dental records. If people have any kind of implants, prosthetic type, we can use serial numbers to identify people. So there are different ways that a person could be identified.
So one of your first jobs then is to get medical records.
Yes.
From wherever they're from.
Yes, they're anti-mortem. They call them anti-mortem records. And so we have to collect them from dentists and doctors and so forth to get them to us where we're working. So we have people collecting that data, and then we're also collecting post-mortem data. That's after death.
Okay. Tough conversation. And obviously, with technology, what it is today, must be a lot easier.
It's easier today than it was in 1989 for Sioux City because we really weren't doing DNA at that time.
Yeah. Now, does somebody have my DNA?
Well,
I'm 53. I had back surgery in 94. But other than that, it's just to the doctor to take blood every 6 months, and he says I'm too fat.
It's a possibility, but if anything would happen to you, like in a disaster, we would ask the survivors and your family to bring us your toothbrush, to bring us dirty underwear, things that would have your DNA.
Okay.
And so we can get that. For your toothbrush would have epithelial cells from inside your mouth. And so we can develop DNA that way. So that's what we ask family members when they come to the Family Assistance Center, that these are the things that you can bring us to help us identify your loved one.
So Flight 232 is done. You have identified the bodies. You go home and somebody says, hey, we're going to have a memorial 1 year later.
1 year later, correct.
All right. Tell us the story about the family.
Well, I decided I wanted to go back because I have to tell you the truth about Sioux City was where even though I did homicide investigations for 10 years prior to that, through my other work, working for the state as a criminalist, I experienced through the Sioux City disaster critical incident stress, and I wanted to quit my job because I never felt as bad as I did because I felt the pain of the people because we were dealing with children, parents that had died on that plane, and you put yourself in the place of those that have lost, and it's very depressing. And so I was at a point where I was going to quit my job. Anyway, I never did. I thank God that he, put me in front of the right people to meet the right people, and he gave me comfort and peace during that time. But I went back a year later because I wanted answers. I wanted answers. I wanted to see the survivors. I wanted to see the family members of the people that I was working with, trying to identify, to give them closure, because all I saw was pain and hurt. So I went to the hangar where we had our morgue set up, and as I was standing there, I had on my cap that identified me as one of the people that worked at the disaster. And a father and son walked up to me and said, were you here at this disaster? And I said, yes. And they said, will you answer questions for us? Because we came here looking for answers. And I said, I'll do my best. So
where were they from? Chicago?
I can't even remember if they were Chicago or for Denver.
Okay.
And they came, and it was a young son. And I said, well, let's sit down. And
Young meaning 10?
Probably 10,
okay.
10, 12, somewhere around there. And so he says, I came here looking for answers, and so far I haven't found answers. And he says, I've been looking for answers for the last year, and I haven't had the answers.
What were the questions?
The questions were, first of all, he said, where did you work? And I said, I worked out on the runway. We were picking up the dead and photographing and doing our crime scene work. And then I said that I also worked in the morgue. And the first thing he said, did you see my wife? And he said she was wearing these kind of clothes and so forth. And I said, well, I don't remember that specifically, but I remember I took photos of most of the people. I was a photographer at that time, and I was also assisting in the morgue. And he says, I want to know everything you did to her, because they sent me a body back, and they told me don't look at her because she's not in presentable condition. That you want to remember her as she was. And so we had a service, and we buried a body. He says, I don't even know if that was my wife. And I'm not even sure the person we buried was my wife. So can you help me? So I said, well, this is what we did. And I told him everything we did and the utmost respect we showed for all of those people and how we handled the bodies and how there were 4 of us around the body bag, and we placed them and transported them to the morgue. And we always had somebody stay with that body on a gurney throughout the entire process of identification. So somebody was always with that person. And so I went through and talked about the dental work we did and the fingerprints and all of that. And basically, he after I went through that, he just immediately, I can see his tense feeling. He just, he says, I've been looking for this for years, for the whole year, and I never got the answers. And he says, there are 12 other families out there that had the same problem as me, and they wouldn't come because they said there are no answers. You answered the question. You answered the question for me. And so I'm going to go back and tell all these families what you told us so that we can have closure. So that not only helped him, it helped me.
What a strange way God works when you give someone a blessing and you help someone, and it ends up being a bigger blessing even for you.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, when we come back, 9/11, where was Jesus? I'm not being flippant. Bob found him, and so did some other people. This is an incredible story of faith and restoration and redemption. It's coming up next live here on Restoring Hope Live. webcast1live.com, powered by webcast1live.com.
Restoring hope.
Here's Dan Celia with today's Stewardship Moment.
I'm not sure the Word of God is received or believed as it should be today. I certainly have my opinion, but I do know this, that there is nothing more important in the world today than for a clear, well-defined, scriptural declaration of the gospel, particularly the gospel of the grace of God. But what about the gospel? See, we have a responsibility as believers to support those efforts that are proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ. I hope as you reflect on your stewardship that you would reflect on the proclamation of the gospel.
You've just heard a Stewardship Moment with Dan Celia of Financial Issues Ministry, helping you plan, give, and invest wisely. For more information, log on to financialissues.org. That's financialissues.org.
You are a waste, a loser. Everyone hates you. Why don't you just stay in your car and keep driving? I'm serious. Drive until you run out of gas, then get out of your car and walk until you find someone who doesn't think you're dumber than bricks. Could take a while, but at least all that walking might burn a couple of calories.
You may not witness bullying like this every day. Your kids do. They want to help, but they don't know how. Visit stopbullying.gov to learn safe, simple ways your child can help stop bullying. Be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov. A message from the Ad Council.
The Pocket Testament League presents Pocket Power. Read, carry, and share the gospel every day. There's no easier way to share your faith than by giving someone a free gift. The Word of God in a compact, pocket-sized gospel.
I'm in a nursing home ministry. My main thrust is for them to get the gospel message. I've used the Gospel of John booklets here, and when we travel or go out to eat.
This is Mike Brickley, president of the Pocket Testament League. League members have found that any place is a good place to share a pocket gospel with someone they meet. Join us and you'll always be ready. Is there anything more important?
I'm so thankful I have the opportunity to share, and I praise God for the ministry that makes it possible for me. I also ride with the Christian Motorcycle Association, and we're taking these out when we ride.
What are you waiting for? Read, carry, and share the gospel every day. For more information, call 1-800-636-8785 or visit pocketpower.org. That's pocketpower.org.
Jill, why don't you tell the class what you did this weekend?
Well, my dad and I went in search of some magical minnows and found a zillion of them in the stream from our lookout rock. Then my sister and I escaped from an evil slug king and went back to my super twig fort for safety. Then we told stories till it got dark, and the Big Dipper led us all the way home.
Wow. Where were you, Jill?
We went to the forest. It's not that far away.
Ask your parents to take you and your friends to the forest this week. It's closer than you think. Check out discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is John Butter. A parent said to me, my kid is on drugs. I need a support group. How do I find one? Well, if you have a kid who's abusing drugs and you're willing to go to a support group, I congratulate you. Lots of parents are unwilling to go get help from other parents. When my wife and I were in the midst of accepting the truth that drugs had invaded our family, we were advised to go to a support group. And the drug counselor who gave us this advice said, you may have to go to more than one group before you find the group to which you can relate. This can take a lot of work and effort, but we thank God that we found a group. We found a group of people where we could share, whose experiences were more advanced than ours, who told us that God was still alive, He was still working in our lives and our kids' lives, and frankly, we would not have survived without that group. It was a help.
Visit lighthousenetwork.org.
Restoring hope. Open my heart to sing. Taking the darkness inside. Revealing your light. Restoring hope.
26 minutes before the top on the 16th day of June in the Lord's year 2013. I'm J. Michael McCoy, and this is Restoring Hope. Remember, we have a video version. We are actually live streaming this on the web, and you can go to restoringhopelive.com, restoringhopelive.com, and watch this. Now, it's not very exciting. It's just Bob and me sitting in a little studio with some stained glass behind us, but it is fun sometimes to see the genuineness of your hosts and the people that are on the radio. This is a very transparent show, not like the Obama administration, by the way. This is very transparent. We are what we are. Eric's in there producing along with Maddie, and we just come together to tell stories of where Jesus impacted our life. Sometimes it's because of alcohol or drugs. Sometimes it's become because of sexual or emotional abuse. Sometimes it's divorce. Sometimes it's depression. But always in the middle, the story finds Christ. It's what my life was like, what happened, and what my life is like now. Next week is going to be a show that I wish I didn't have to do. One of my best buddies in the world lost his 24-year-old daughter to a violent car crash a week ago, and he buried her yesterday. And I wanted him to come on today for Father's Day so he could just vent and he could just, share that part of what he's going through. But God love him, he just couldn't do it today. So he'll be on next week. It'll be kind of our Father's Day show delayed. All right. Bob Monserrate, the Cat in the Hat, is with us as our guest today, and he's a part of the DMORT team. Say what that means again.
Disaster Mortuary Operational Response Team.
All right. So what you do is when there's a major disaster and there's a lot of death, you go in, collect body parts or bodies, and then you have to identify them for the family.
Yeah, and there's a team of people, civilians, doctors, nurses, people like me in law enforcement, mental health people, anthropologists. We have a team of people with expertise to go in depending on what's needed and do the job.
Now, on like Flight 232 in Sioux City, and this is a tough show to do because we have to talk about things like this, but did you have to identify an arm and which body it goes to?
In Sioux City, it wasn't as bad as some of the other disasters I've been on. And some of the other disasters, all we had were body parts. And sure, we would try to match them to the one body it came from. Right.
Now, you mentioned earlier about your team or people representing your team would say to the family, this is your family member in this body bag. Do not look at it. You do not want to remember this person like that.
Well, sometimes that is the case, and usually it's not us. It's usually the mortician, whoever they sent to handle the funeral arrangements. They will look at the body, and then they'll tell the person what they think.
And it's because of the lifelong image that would be burned into your brain.
That's correct. It's a psychological impact that some people would prefer not to see or view.
What would you recommend in situations like that?
I can't speak for people or what they would want to do. Some people, some of the people that they're in very terrible condition. And I suppose if I saw that, I would suggest that they would not view that person.
See, I don't know what I'd do in that situation.
But I know other people that would want to.
Yeah. See, when I was a kid, when I was about 15, 16 years old, there was an older woman, like 20, who we ran around with, and she was killed in a car accident. And I went to her funeral, and she was in a red dress, and I can never remember what she looked like before the funeral. And I always wondered, do I want to look at dead people? And for a long time, I didn't look at dead people. I would go to funerals and not look at the body in the coffin, the casket. But God gave me the ability to do that a few years ago, and now I'm able to actually go up and...
Right. And, it's really the family's decision. The mortician will discuss, if they can reconstruct people, they will do their best job. But if the family, decides not to do that, then it'll be closed casket.
Yeah. I know one guy who died of alcoholism, and I mean he drank himself to death. He was down to less than 100 pounds. He looked horrible, but the family wanted the casket to be open so people could see what alcoholism did to him.
Sure. Yeah, I can understand that.
What an impact.
It's really a family decision on those.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, you were at Katrina, but you were at 9/11. I guess that's the place I want to go to. When were you called into New York City on 9/11? It happened on was it a Monday morning or Tuesday?
I was out on the road. I'm thinking it was probably a Tuesday. I can't remember specifically. I know everybody remembers September 11th, 2001. Everybody remembers what they were doing.
Yeah, I remember.
Everybody remembers that because it was the impact it has on the nation and the world, really. And so I was working, and I knew I was in Sioux City. doing my regular state work, as a criminalist. And when I heard I heard a plane crash into the towers like everybody else. And then as I was looking at the TV to see what was going on, the second one hit, and I knew I was going to New York. I knew that because I was on the team. And so I drove back from Sioux City, which took 3 hours to get from there to Des Moines. And I was just listening to the radio, and I don't even remember the time as it passed.
Yeah.
And I was depressed because I knew people that worked in the towers. I lived out there. I used to work in New York.
Yeah.
And so...
And you were also, if I may add, suffering from cancer.
Yes, I was diagnosed with cancer in March of 2001, melanoma, and it was pretty advanced, and I was going through 6 months of chemo, and so I was in a weakened condition at the time, and so when I was driving back, I was trying to decide, should I go when they call me? And sure enough, when I got back, I had phone calls from Red Cross, World Relief, DMORT, and they all wanted me to respond, and I knew I was committed to DMORT. And so they called me and they said, can you deploy tomorrow to go to the Pentagon? Wanted me to fly. And they said, well, you're going to have to drive to Kansas City because all the planes were grounded. And so I had to take a C-130.
Which is an Army plane.
Army plane. And so when they asked me that, I said no.
Really?
No. I said no, I can't. Because I was psychologically traumatized. Number one, because I was from that area. I've been in those towers. I've taken my family up there to see the windows of the world, look over this. I had such a strong connection. I was really upset, and I just felt like I couldn't do it. And then also I was still taking cancer treatments. I was going through chemo at the time, so I said, get me the second round, and then I think I'll be ready psychologically and physically. And so they called me later and they said, would you go to New York? But what happened was that trip to Washington was canceled because the military determined that they thought they had 800 or 900 killed at the Pentagon, and it turned out to be less than 200. And so they said, all right, we can take care of this ourselves. So they canceled the deployment. Everybody was in the plane ready to take off, and they canceled it. So me saying no worked out fine. Okay, I didn't have to go through all of that. And so they got me and they asked me, and they called me specifically. They said, we need a person to do mental health work here, and you were recommended to come and do it. And will you come? And I said, yes, I'll come.
To do mental health work.
Right, to work with DMORT people, with the local fire department, local police department, family members.
So you are dealing with family members of the dead, but mostly you're dealing with your own.
Yes, right.
You're there to service your own.
My own, right. But wherever you are, you don't know who you're going to see.
Right. So how many days after the attack did you come to New York?
It was actually 1 month later.
1 month?
1 month later.
Boy, that seemed like a lifetime.
Yeah, but I needed it.
You needed it?
I needed to wait.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean.
I needed to wait.
Did you need to go?
Yes, that too.
Why?
Well, because
I mean, how did you go from heck no way to I need to go?
Well, it was I spent a lot of time in prayer.
Okay.
And went to church quite a bit, like most of the country, if you remember.
Yeah.
Everybody was finding themselves going to church because they couldn't believe that we were vulnerable to an attack like that.
Yeah.
And so people, when they go through adverse conditions, a lot of times will turn to God. And so I spent a lot of time in prayer, asking for strength, because I didn't think I'd be able to physically do that, still going through the chemo treatment. And so, and then when the call came, I knew I was ready to go at that time, and so I did. I agreed to go. And so, because I felt like this is what the Lord wanted me to do. He wanted me to experience this and be there.
Did your plane ride into New York fly over Ground Zero?
No, it did not.
All right. I didn't know if you got to see the disaster from the
air. No, it was still smoking. The fires were still going.
A month later?
Yes. Fire burned for 100 days.
Because of the fuel in the planes?
Well, that was part of it, but also the building materials. It burned for 100 days.
Wow. And in the midst of this, you met Jesus.
Of course, I knew Jesus, but I met him in a different way.
You met him in a different way.
Right.
And what's amazing about the story you're about to tell when we come back is that there were other people that also felt him there.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the whole reason why I waited, and that's the reason why he wanted me to go, because he wanted me to experience him in a different way.
Wow.
And I did.
When we come back, it's Bob Monserrate's story about how he experienced our Lord and Savior at the foot of Ground Zero back in 2001. I'm J. Michael McCoy. If I haven't told you lately, thanks for listening. I know you got 100 choices, 1,000 choices of what you could be doing right now, but For whatever reason, the Lord has led you here to hear Bob's story, and we hope that story has a wonderful impact on you. It's coming up next here live on Restoring Hope, powered by webcast1live.com.
Restoring hope.
Well, for me, it was alcohol. For you, it might be drugs. I'm J. Michael McCoy with Joe Meintz from St. Gregory Retreat Center. Joe, you say St. Gregory Retreat Centers are different. What's so unique about your approach?
Well, first of all, St. Gregory Center is more of an intensive training program than just an addiction recovery center. We help our clients set some very ambitious goals for their lives by focusing more on empowerment and leadership, physical health and healing, and a life of virtue. This goes far beyond mere sobriety, which frankly is why so many more of our clients achieve just that.
Can you give me some more examples of how, St. Gregory does this?
Absolutely. First of all, we believe you need to be well enough to recover. For this reason, every guest will spend at least a week with our medical team preparing physically for that recovery. This involves our proprietary IV neurorestoration therapy, as well as very specific nutritional regimens.
So once someone begins to heal physically, then what?
Well, now we begin the real work on teaching them how to reevaluate this process of events in their lives and to better understand why they think and feel the way that they do. Our program teaches how to change your thinking, how to modify your behavior to obtain better outcomes, and we really focus on teaching the life skills needed to truly find a life of purpose, joy, and fulfillment.
Wow. Okay. That I've heard enough. I need to get a hold of somebody. Tell the listeners how they can get a hold of St. Gregory Retreat Center.
You can reach out to us at 888-778-5833. We have counselors standing by at that number. Again, that's 888-778-5833. You can also do a Google search for St. Gregory Retreat Center and find us that way. Or you can go to your website at restoringhopelive.com and click on our logo.
The Pocket Testament League presents Pocket Power. Read, carry, and share the gospel every day. There's no easier way to share your faith than by giving someone a free gift, the Word of God in a compact, pocket-sized gospel.
I'm in a nursing home ministry. My main thrust is for them to get the gospel message. I've used the Gospel of John booklets here, and when we travel or go out to eat.
This is Mike Brickley, president of the Pocket Testament League. League members have found that any place is a good place to share a pocket gospel with someone they meet. Join us and you'll always be ready. Is there anything more important?
I'm so thankful I have the opportunity to share, and I praise God for the ministry that makes it possible for me. I also ride with the Christian Motorcycle Association, and we're taking these out when we ride.
What are you waiting for? Read, carry, and share the gospel every day. For more information, call 1-800-636-8785 or visit pocketpower.org. That's pocketpower.org.
This is John Vodder with Not Alone. Here is another testimony of God at work.
My struggle with drugs started in junior high with pot. I was always shy, and doing drugs helped me fit in. Then in college, I tried cocaine, and the first time scared me, but the feeling was incredible, and I moved on to heroin. After that, it seemed like nothing else mattered. Fighting with my dad, stealing from my grandparents. Everyone wrote me off, and my chances were all used up. At 19, I went to rehab, and I've been in and out of 5 of them in the last 8 years. Then a friend heard Not Alone on this radio station. I went to lighthousenetwork.org, and the care guide there found me the help I so desperately needed. I'm now getting my life back together, one step at a time, and so can you.
If you or someone you love needs help today, remember you're not alone. Go to lighthousenetwork.org and find help now.
Restoring hope, open my heart to sing, taking the darkness inside, revealing your light, restoring hope.
Happy Father's Day 2013. I'm J. Michael McCoy. Bob Monserrate is my guest, and we're talking about where Jesus was on 9/11. I think I'm blessed or cursed, I don't know which, to have a lot of non-believers around me in my life. I'm fortunate that after I found Jesus, most of my old friends kept hanging around me for some reason. I think that's probably the Lord's plan. And it's when you hear stories like Bob is telling today that you kind of wonder why a non-believer just doesn't go, okay, I give up. There is a God, and there is Jesus, and there is the Holy Spirit. Why is it that some people are so tied to the accuser? They're in such a deep relationship with sin that they can't see their Creator's face. It baffles me sometimes. Thank God you're here. I appreciate you listening, and let's finish this story. So you're on the ground in 9/11, and St. Paul's Church, which is what, like a block away?
Yeah, St. Paul's Chapel was within the ground zero area. It was cordoned off, so only emergency workers could be there.
And it was set up as a place for the workers to go and refresh themselves?
Yes, it was a respite center. They call it a respite center.
Okay, food, water.
Yeah, clothes, socks,
sleep.
Yeah, chiropractors, massage therapists.
So they turned a church into a
place of rest.
Yeah.
Because the workers would go in there to get some food, to get, like I said, massage or chiropractic adjustments, because they're working out there in the rubble, and they're also laying in the pews. I mean, they're sleeping to get some rest that they can get. So it's a rest center.
What did it smell like?
At Ground Zero?
Yeah.
Well, it was a mix of burned drywall that was burning, but also I would get whiffs of decomposition. You have to understand, each of those towers were 110 stories. Each floor had an acre of office space, but they also had restaurants, malls. They were cities. There were 25,000 people that worked in each tower and 90,000 visitors a day to the tower. So it was a good target for terrorists, because it would have the most bang, meaning it would kill the most people. And if you remember, the mayor, Rudy Giuliani at the time, ordered up 30,000 body bags because he thought that the count would be that high.
Yeah.
And so, but that was the odor that I was getting when I was down there at Ground Zero.
So tell me about the time that Jesus bumped into you at St. Paul's.
Well, obviously he's with us all the time, but he revealed himself really strong to me when I was out there. I was helping a lot of people, doing one-on-one counseling with people that were having difficulties and problems. And so I was with another person that was with the Surgeon General's army of mental health people. And we stopped, and I saw that there was a respite center there, St. Paul's Chapel, and I decided, well, I'm going to go in. He decided he didn't want to go in. For whatever reasons he had, he was going to stay outside. So I went in by myself, and when I walked in, I immediately sensed a presence. And to me, it was a spiritual experience, that it was the Lord's presence in that building.
Had you ever felt this before?
I had never felt to that extent before. And I looked around, and I'm looking at the people that were in there, handing out food, helping people, doing different things. But I was looking at them like, man, do you guys feel this? I mean, I was thinking in my mind, do you feel what I feel? And yet I didn't see any indication of that in the people that were there. And so when I walked in, I just thought, oh, I've got to pray. I've got to sit down and pray. So I went into the sanctuary there. I walked around, and I found an empty spot because, like I said, there were people that were sleeping and laying down trying to get rest. And I just sat there. And I sat there, and I looked at the stained glass that was around me, and I just started praying because I didn't know what else. I mean, I felt like I had to do that because his presence was so strong there. Anyway, I knew I had to leave because I had a guy waiting outside for me. And I said, I am coming back to this place because I've never felt this before. And so I came out and went with him, went down to Ground Zero because we had to work with some of the they were DMAT people. I'm changing the name.
Yeah.
Disaster Medical Assistance.
Okay.
Okay. So there were DMATs that had tents set up that were helping the injured people. So they're made up of doctors, nurses, EMTs, and so forth. So I went down there, and I struck up a conversation with one of the EMTs, and within, I'd say 4 minutes, 5 minutes, we knew we were both believers.
Okay.
And when he knew that, after we were talking, within that short period of time, he said to me, he says, have you been to St. Paul's Chapel? And I said, yeah. Why? He says, did you sense anything there? Did you feel anything there? I said, yeah. I said, how about you? What did you feel? He says, I tell you what, I was walking. I went to the main door there that was open.
Which is where you went.
Where I went through that door. And he says, and I don't know. He says, I was just looking through the door, and then I leaned on the side of the entrance, And when I leaned on the side, he said, I just was zapped. He says, I felt the power, and it was so strong, it pushed me back that I staggered and fell on my butt. And he says, and one of the pastors that was there saw this and come running to me because he thought something's wrong. And he came over me and he knelt down and he says, are you okay? Is there anything wrong? And he goes, there's nothing wrong. He says, what happened? He said, I was knocked over by the power of God. It went right through my body, and it was so powerful it knocked me down. He said, so I felt that power. And the pastor goes, you did? I mean, it was like he was shocked because he didn't feel anything. And then I told him, I said, I didn't touch the door jamb, so it didn't knock me down. But when I walked through that door, I felt the power so strong. And so that was a confirmation for me.
Why do you think some people felt it and others didn't?
I don't know. I think it's just the Lord comes to people at different times in their life, different seasons in their life. Some people are going to experience the Lord. And like I said, it depends on where they are, how well they know the Lord, what their walk is, and when if he decides he needs to come to you. Now, I have to also say later when I came back, years later, I found out more about that St. Paul's Chapel. Did you know that back when George Washington was sworn in as president? Okay, it was in New York. After he was sworn in, he and the Congress walked to St. Paul's Chapel, and Washington dedicated our country to the Lord in that chapel.
Really?
Yes, and I did not know that. So there was spiritual significance to that chapel.
So for all those people that say we weren't founded on a Christian nation, they're just full of monkey poo.
Well, yeah. So that is what I did not know when I went in there.
Yeah.
And found out years later that was, but since that time, my life has changed significantly. And I felt like the Lord just at that time drew me closer to him.
How did it impact your walk with Christ, your relationship with
Totally changed. A change from...
Because you were already a believer. You've been a believer all your life almost.
I was a believer all my life, but what I learned was really that the Lord wanted me to know him in an intimate way. It's not just knowing about him, but knowing him, spending time with him, making him number one in your life, thinking about him every day. Because it's important, when you're in love with somebody, when you're going to get married and you're in love, you think about your loved one all the time. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of relationship he wants for the bride. He wants us to be one with him. And so that's what I learned, and that's what he gave me, that desire to know him like I've never known him before. So that's life-changing.
Would you consider that a spiritual awakening or a spiritual incident?
Well, you can consider it, I guess I would say awakening, a realization of what he really wants for all of us, to be one with him and to know him and to depend on him and ask him every day, Lord, what do you have for me today? What do you want for me to do today? As opposed to, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that.
Thank you, Bob, for sharing that story with us today. Bob's got so many stories out on the road like that, and we'll share more with you as time goes on. Our time is up. Happy Father's Day to my dad, John. I love you, Dad. Thanks for being such an incredible, moral guy. Thanks for being a stand-up man. Thanks for being a great husband to my mother and a wonderful father to my sister. Until we meet again, remember, I always ask one thing of you. There is a price of admission to this program. It doesn't come out of your pocket. It comes out of your heart. Please pray.